Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Kojeve's notion of authority. We're leaving off where we left off. This is pages 13 to 28, which is part two of the first section. Remember, part one, two, and three. This is part one, um, the phenomenological analysis. The second section will continue. Uh, all forms of human authority have this in common. They make possible the exercise of an action does not provoke reaction, because those who could have reacted abstain from doing so consciously and voluntarily. So that's the whole point. Authority is what? That it has the possibility, they make possible the exercise of an action that does not provoke a reaction, because those who could have reacted have abstained consciously doing so, or consciously or voluntarily doing so. Conversely, whenever men submit to an action that they would not have affected by themselves, by consciously and voluntarily renouncing the facility directed against it, it is possible to observe the intervention of an authority. So, therefore, right here we get Kojeve's a kind of explanation of what authority means. But since the reaction always remains possible, and the renunciation is conscious and voluntary, the question arises as to why this is the case. Now, this is what I would argue the question of how voluntary. This goes into a psychology that I don't think Kojeve is fully addressing here, because the question is people's reaction out of fear. It may be or threat, maybe fear, which based because of threat of coercion, or the perception that coercion will be used, is this a voluntary act or not? Hobbes would say yes. Hobbes has a very simple. Hobbes in his social contract says yes. The fear of violence and everything like that leads people to consent. Now, a more liberal common law view of the old liberal of the legal order of the common law was that no, any coercion, once you have any coercion involved, that coercion nullifies the agreement, nullifies a contract. If a contract made under duress is no contract. For Hobbes, a contract made under duress is perfectly binding. It's logical. Um, and therefore, this is a question that we have to frame this debate on. What is meant by voluntary in this sense? Consciously voluntary, right? Every authority raises the question of knowing why it exists. That is to say, why it is recognized by people submitting to the acts that ensures from it without reacting against them. So, this is the why it exists. The why question is why people recognize this, and why do they don't resist it. The answer to these questions is diverse, and each different answer corresponds to a particular type of authority. So that is the answer. This is the different whys. The why you don't. Why is this accepted? First of all, a list needs to be drawn up of all the possible types of authority. No, count. We could count a good 20 of these, but as long as we do not have a theory of authority, we can never be sure that this list is complete. Afterward, that's a note. That's a note that Coach reads here. We have to do the thing, but until we have a theory of authority that we could test and validate, then wouldn't know if this list is complete. Afterwards, pure types, that is, the ones that are irreducible to others, must be extracted and described to show how the composite types are constituted by a combination of these simple or pure types. It is out of the question of this wholly phenomenological analysis to be carried out here. It is out of the question for this wholly. So therefore, it's we give this whole thing that we do this. It can't be done here. So let us assume it's already been done and sum up the results of our analysis without having to demonstrate it, so to speak. So what he's doing is saying, it's going to be inappropriate for us to go do that complete thing here. So instead of doing, it's beyond the scope of this little short thing. A full scope phenomenology of doing this would, it would be 20 things long, and we don't have enough theory, and we have to do this theory to be very long and descriptive, and we're not going to. So cut to the chase. We're going to examine this at this stage. Like, in other words, I have the question that we do this, and we assume that it's not. We assume that this. I'm just going to give you the results. Assume that this has been done, and sum up the results of our analysis without demonstrating the analysis. So let us then say that we can distinguish four simple or pure elementary types of authority. A, the authority of the father or parents in general over the child. So therefore, this is variance, authority arising from a great age gap, the authority of elderly over the young, the authority of tradition or those who hold it, the authority of the dead, a will, right? The authority of an author over his works, or over, and so on. In other words, these are the kind of the authority of an age gap, an elderly thing, the authority of the dead in terms of a will, and the author kind of his work, right? Note on the authority of the dead. Generally speaking, men have more authority after his death than during his lifetime. A will have more authority than the order given by a man still alive. A promise is more binding after the death of the person to whom it has been made. The order of a dead father are respected better than the ones he gave during his lifetime, and so on. The reason this is so is that it is physically impossible to react against the dead. In that sense, they have authority by definition. But this impossibility of reacting assures the authority of the dead a divine or sacred character. The reverence of authority of the dead does not entail any risk to them, since both the strength and weakness of this authority, okay, they have no reaction to it, and it can't be reacted against. They're dead here, and they don't have any, and their weakness is they have no way to act here. Okay, overall, this is a particular case of divine authority. So the role of the father, the dead, right? B. So if A is, and uses the, notice here, this is interesting. He does it with the Greek alphabet, right? Alpha, right? And now he's so first the authority of the father, we say, and then we get the authority of the authority of the dead, right? The authority of the master over the slave. Beta, the author of the master over the slave. Variance, the authority of the nobleman over the serf. The authority of the soldier over the civilian. The authority of a man over a woman. The authority of the victor over the vanquished, and so on. Note on the authority of the victor. It goes without saying, in order for authority to exist, the victor must be recognized as such by the vanquished. That is to say, the vanquished must recognize his defeat. Compare the German slogan "Infriger Unblench," undefeated in battle. Right? That's the thing, which destroyed the emergent authority of the victors of 1918, and later, having not had the victory recognized, had no authority. They thus had to call on force, with the known result that followed. Okay, so therefore, this is the idea that his example is the German reaction, and therefore the Allied powers had to use physical force to achieve German compliance with the Versailles Agreement, right? So therefore, the idea recognized that we were not defeated in battle. The vanquished needs to recognize this. But this is the master-slave in that sense. There's this idea, but wait a minute, but isn't the master and the slave? This is what I don't really understand. The master and the slave, there's coercion involved. No one would be a slave voluntarily or serve voluntarily. They are so only voluntarily because they prefer to live than to die. In other words, because they say if they choose, the choice is not between free and not free. It's between being alive as a slave or dead. Okay, and the rational actor would prefer to be alive. Right? The argument is, or maybe not. This is the question, right? The free man would not choose to be alive. The idea of the slave would be, this is that weird problem that if the choice is between death and slavery, then doesn't one choose slavery by choosing to be alive? And I think this is a problem in Kojeve's point here, is that this idea of the recognition of he's using this idea that in order to be vanquished, this master of this point here about the victor over the defeated, right? Victor of the vanquished, requires the vanquish if the for the victor to have authority over that, they must recognize it. The master to have authority over the slave, he must accept the authority. In other words, so this is what he says here. This is that line. Gamma, alpha, beta, gamma, right? The authority of the leader, ducha, Führer, leader, and so on, over the band. The band here is the original group. This is the idea of the leader and the band. Variance, authority of superior, director, officer, and so on, and the subordinate, employer, soldier, and so on. The authority of the master over the pupil, the authority of the scholar and the technician, and so on. The authority of the soothsayer and the prophet, and so on. So therefore, this is the variant. This is the first for the idea of the leader, and the leader is. This is basically that in a group there's going to be someone who takes the lead, right? And therefore they have some knowledge or some ability or some virtue. The classics say virtue, that allows that the others recognize that they will obey, right? And so forth. This is therefore the view of the superior, right? This is that one aspect. The other part, the note of the authority of the officer. This authority is a good example of compound authority. Besides a specific authority as a leader, which he exerts over a soldier, and also benefits from the authority of the master. Again, for the master slave, right? And that all soldiers have over civilians. With regard to his fellow soldiers, he generally possesses as well as the authority of the father. And finally, he embodies the authority of the judge, which we discuss right away. So, first, the father, slave, leader, and then judge, right? This is now. Okay, let's go back here for a second. The first A is over here. The second, this is the alpha. So A, I made a mistake. This is the A over here. The alpha is over here, right? So alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? The authority of the judge, variance. The judge, the person who decides, right? The judge is the one who determines the guilt, who makes the decision, right? Who then, in other words, variance, the authority of the arbitrator, the authority of the supervisor, the moderator, and so on, the authority of the confessor, the authority of the just or honest man, and so on. Note on the authority of the confessor. Again, this is again another example of a compound authority. Besides his authority as judge, he adjudicates. He makes a person who judge has a choice between two things and makes a decision, right? So the confessor also enjoys the benefits of the authority of the leader in his capacity of spiritual advisor. And while he enjoys the benefit of the authority of the father, he lacks that of the master. So he doesn't have the authority of the master, but he also enjoys of being someone like a father figure, right? So the confessor is a judge and leader and father, but not master. Note on the authority of the just. tell the truth, this is the purest case of the authority of the judge. This is pure judge. The authority of the just is the authority of the judge per se, right? Because the judge, in the narrow sense, possesses, besides his spontaneous, the authority as a judge, the derivative authority of a civil servant, right? This is, in other words, this is the purest case of authority of the judge. The just man who knows what is right. What is the right thing to do? He knows the right. He's able to determine what is right and what is wrong, what is true, what is false, what is just, what is unjust. Because the judge, in the narrow sense, possesses, besides his spontaneous, beside his authority as a judge, spontaneous authority of a judge, the derivative authority of a civil servant. So the judge, as we understand it, is a civil servant. Therefore, the authority that he has his position because he is a servant of the state, the servant of the body politic. So this was all these four things, criteria. He's here, right? The authority of the father, the authority of the master, the authority of the leader, and the authority of the judge, right? So we have we therefore have four types of pure authority. We have seen also possible to distinguish four reducible types of authority. This leads us to suppose that each one of these theories, which is in the eyes of a general of its author, a general theory of authority, is in reality nothing but a theory of one of the four particular types listed above. So they're each, in other words, it's not. In other words, it's not. These are not. There are four types of authority. In other words, possible to distinguish four irreducible theories of authority. This leads us to suppose that each one of these theories, in the eyes of its author, of a general authority, is in reality nothing but a theory of one of the four principal types of. Let us see if this is truly the case. We have then, in chronological orders, the theory of Plato, Aristotle, the scholastics, i.e., etc., theological theory, and Hegel. Let us start with the last of these. Hegel's theory of authority takes the form of a theory of relation between master and slave. But here it seems that Hegel saw in this relation a general theory of authority, considering all forms of authority as derivatives of the means of the master in relation to the slave. In any case, he did not elaborate any other theory of authority. So Hegel just relied on this. This is from his phenomenology, the master-slave dialectic. It's in his phenomenology of Guy's spirit, mind, right? Hegel's theory, very sophisticated philosophical speaking, counts perfectly well for our second type of pure authority. That is to say, the authority of the master of the slaves. Here is how it works. For more details, see my article, Autonomy and Dependence of Self-Consciousness in Mezières. This is a thing first published in Mezières 1939, reproduced in the opening chapter of introduction of the lecture of Hegel, German 68, the English translation. This is edited by Bloom in 1969. Right? Pages 3 to 30. This is where this article can be found again. So mastery arises from the struggle to the death. The mastery struggles to death for recognition. Nice German word. Right? This is the big word in Hegel, recognition. The two opponents each posits for themselves an end that is essentially human, non-animal, and non-biological. That of being recognized in the other, in their human reality or dignity. But the future master endures the trial of struggle and risk, while the future slave fails to control his animal fear of death. He thus surrenders, recognizes his defeat, recognizes the superiority of the victor, and subjugates himself to a master, himself as a slave to his master. This is how the absolute authority of the master arises in relation to his slave. Right? Thus, the master overcomes in himself his natural animal share, which manifests itself the instinct for self-preservation, and subordinates it to that which is specifically human for him. This human element manifests itself as a desire for recognition, as vanity that is devoid of any vital biological value. In other words, he wants to be recognized. He wants to be. This is that problem. What does recognition mean in this sense? This means that I'm me, my. Pay attention to me. I'm in charge. I'm here. You submit to me. The slave, by contrast, subordinates the human needs to the natural, to the animal. It is consequently possible to say that the authority of the master over the slave is similar to the authority of man over the beasts and nature in general, with one difference. Now, for here is the ellipse appeared in the French original without explanation, possibly indicates illegible words in this, so that's the problem here. The animal is conscious of its the animal is conscious of its inferiority and accepts it freely. So the animal is aware of it, is conscious of his inferiority, but is he okay? He's conscious. It is precisely for this reason that there is authority in this case. The slave consciously and voluntarily renounces the opportunity he has for reacting against the action of the master. He does so because he knows that this reaction puts his life at risk, and because he does not want to accept this risk. Okay, so therefore, this is the exact point I was raising earlier. Right? This question here is how the slave voluntarily renounces. Well, how voluntary? The choice, like I said, this is not a choice between two options that are equal. This is option between life and death, life as a slave or death. Okay, and does not want to accept the risk. Right. Hegel's theory is therefore indeed a theory of authority. Well, okay, but wait a minute. Okay, voluntarily, this is how voluntary is this? You choose it, but it's not. It's a very suboptimal choice, right? And it is indeed. It indeed explains the why and wherefore the authority of the master over the slave. It is therefore an accurate theory. It is therefore an accurate theory of this particular type of pure authority. But it is inadequate for the other types of authority. For example, it does not account for the authority of the leader. A master does not have authority only over the relation to a slave, qua master in the narrow sense. He can also, in his capacity as a leader, and authority in relation over other masters. But Hegel's theory does not account for the existence of an authority of the leader among men who are socially equal. And it even applies less to the fact pertaining to the authority of the father or the judge, where the element of struggle and risk of life is totally lacking. By contrast, Hegel's theory explains the relationship between the authority of the master and the cases we have encountered in its variants, while taking into account the fact of the authority of the nobleman, of the soldier, of the man, of the victor, all have compound characters, and must be said that the predominant element that remains their ultimate basis or justification is nothing other than the authority of the master, founded on risk. This is obvious for the soldier and the civilian, and for the victor and the vanquished. But it is equally unquestionable that the nobleman is originally and therefore and before everything else a warrior. Therefore, the serf does not take part in war. Finally, it seems that it is ultimately for the same reason that man derives the authority of women. That's even more interesting. That okay, whoa. Wow. um, uh, Finally, this ultimate reason for the same authority man derives his authority over women. Wow. It's slavery. It is, but Aristotle's nice. I mean, Hesiod may agree with this. A reading of Hesiod would argue this, right? But Aristotle in his Politics 2, explicitly, Politics 1, sorry, Book 1, Chapter 2, and elsewhere, denies this. And later, even later in the section, that woman is a slave is a mistake. That's barbarians think this, not free men, not there's an equality of this. Not there is an equality. This is what the problem with this. That okay, this is okay, and it seems ultimately for the same reason that man derives it. Okay, that's oof, this is very sexist. Now this is the crime everyone claims about Aristotle. It's even more true about Kojeve here, and that's by this claim. Let us now move on to Aristotle's theory. So it is also presented as a theory of mastery, but in reality, it applies to a completely degree type of authority. Now, I would not use the word mastery. I would say rule, where Hegel's conception of is the German or the English word, or the Greek word is arche, to rule, the master despotic Greek is despote is a type of rule, right? Rule of over a slave. Um, so here we get a different kind of authority, right? In reality, according to Aristotle, the master has the right to exercise his authority over the slave because he can anticipate, whereas the latter only notices immediate needs and is guided extensively by these. Again, this is Book 1, Chapter 2 of the Politics, where he deals with that question of the idea of foresight, right? Foresight, that those who lack foresight should be ruled. And this is the argument about slavery, and that's a natural slavery. The natural slave lacks all foresight, has no ability to understand what's even good for him, what's within. Therefore, the natural slave, in order to be human or to have exercised the good, his own good, he needs to be ruled by one who has foresight, right? Again, this is chapter 4 of Book 1 of the Politics, right? So the idea he anticipates. It is therefore, if we like, the authority of the intelligent over the unthinking, of the civilized over the barbarian, of the ant over the grasshopper, or the clear-sighted over the blind. It is also the authority of the person who gives an order over the person who carries it out. The person who realizes that he sees less well and and less far than another readily acknowledge himself to be led or guided by this other person. He thus consciously renounces all possible reactions. He submits the other acts without going against them, without protesting, without discussing them, without even asking questions. He follows the other blindly. So this is and therefore there is therefore indeed authority in this case, but the authority but this theory of authority has nothing to do with the authority of the master, which is by contrast will be explained by Hegel's theory. Aristotle's theory applies this to the case of the authority of the leader in relation to the band, on account of the authority of the duke, duce, the Führer, and the political leader, and so on. Okay, right? Um, English in the original text. Okay. This is the political leader, and so on. And the politikos. The Greek word would have been the politikos. The politikos. The politikos, right? The politikos. Therefore, this idea, in fact, this is the so therefore this is the political man, right? This has the foresight, the idea of judgment. Okay, that's very interesting. I think he's on to something here in that sense. Let us consider a familiar type: the band of kids together to play. One of these kids possesses to go and steal apples from the orchard next door. Immediately by doing so, he cast himself in the role of the band's leader. He became this leader because he saw far further than the others, because it was he alone who thought of a project, while the others did not manage to get beyond the level of immediate facts. Now, everything suggests that the first true leader emerged in the same manner. A band of masters, aristocratic brigands, rally around a leader who possesses a plan for a raid, and he is invested with the absolute authority as long as the execution of his project lasts. He is dictator. He is even a king. Compare the spontaneous origin of authority in leaders Xenophon and Abbasis in this section, right? And in Xenophon's and Abbasis, his account of how he becomes the general in charge, right? And Abbasis, book 3, 1, 4, 14 through 27, 30, and in part 2, 2 through 5, right? The account of his example of leadership. No, we are talking here of the leader of the band, not the leader of a state, whose authority is complex, which, with that of the leader, only has one element. Other people follow him. This is about that the leader of the state has more levels of authority, more complex. Leader of the band versus leader of the state. Leader of the state has more aspects. We'll talk about this. We shall discuss this again in B part 1. For the time being, let us just say the following. Sociologists has established that the state generally comes into being wherever a band of conquerors or masters settle a conquered country. In a conquered country, or more or less subjugate the aboriginals. These vanquished are later subjects of the victor, who enjoys, in relation to the former, the authority of the master. The leader of the victors is therefore primarily a leader, and in relation to his equals and to masters. And secondly, a master in relation to his subjects, the slaves of the vanquished. It is by being simultaneously leader and master that he is head of state or sovereign, king or dictator in the proper sense of the term, which does not mean, however, that he is only a leader or a master. He is additionally enjoys the authority of the father and the judge. Aristotle's this is this actually the medieval European count of this. But what happens if you have one of citizens? If there's no slaves, but then again, the problem is there is slaves in that sense. But the citizens are of equals, right? This is that question: is there's no real slaves underneath, right? There's no maybe domestics, but there's also somewhat equals to this, right? So the example he gives here is more of the pure European structure. Okay, I understand why he's doing this. It's for simplicity, but okay. Aristotle's theory accounts then for the leader of the authority of the leader of a band, and it allows us to explain the relation between this authority and what we call its variance. Things are clear as far as the authority of the superior over subordinates is concerned. The director and officer can see further than the employee or the soldier. They have information about the future. They contrive plans and projects, while the subordinate cannot see everything other than the immediate facts and daily needs. Even if the superiors are just relaying orders coming from further up the hierarchy, they know these before their subordinates. And so they also enjoy the benefits of prescience over the latter. So therefore, even if they're just information things, they just get it quicker. They have prescience. It is similar with the authority of the master over the pupil, right? The pupil renounces all reactions against the acts of the master because he thinks that the latter is already in a position that he will reach only much later. The master is more advanced than he is. So not the master of the slave, but the master and the pupil. He accepts the authority of this and accepts this authority because he hopes that the master has knowledge or something that he wants to have, and that with time he will likewise have it. Right. The same observation applies to the authority of the scholar or the technician, and so on. They see the bottom of a thing while the uneducated see only the surface. In this sense, they see better than the latter. They have a broader and more profound view of things. Hence comes their ability to foresee events. Such ability has always confirmed and even created the authority of the scholar. Right? Finally, the authority of the soothsayer, the prophet, the oracle, and so on, is a particularly striking example of authority in line with Aristotle's theory. The unquestionable authority of the soothsayer, the oracle, is a pure case of the authority of the leader. By contrast, Aristotle's theory does not account for the authority of the master over the slave, as thoroughly explained by Hegel, and neither does it have anything to say about the authority of the father or that over the judge. But Aristotle might say, "Wait a minute, no, Mr. Hegel. I do have the slave. My argument: the slave is lacking of judgment, and natural slave is this, and your idea is non-natural slave. It's not just." Okay, right. It is true that the father of the family can be the same as the leader of the band if the family itself is this band, but the authority of the leader has nothing to do with the authority he holds as a father. And it is again something different from the authority of the master over the pupil. Quite quite obviously, the authority of the father has nothing to do with his personal character, as is the case in all forms of pure authority of the leader. And the compound authorities where elements of leader is involved. So in other words, the authority of the leader has to do with his character, something about his personal character, his personal virtue, personal thing. But the authority of the father is not due to his virtue, particular character, but something else. That he's the father, right? He begat you. As for the judge, we move from first we move from the master slave, Hegel's theory, Aristotle's theory. Now we move to the judge, right? As for the judge, his authority has nothing to do with project, prescience, or prediction. He does not suppose anything. He only judges that which is. And the authority of the judge does not lie in his wide knowledge of the law. His authority lies exclusively in his justice. It is therefore not Aristotle's theory, but Plato, which accounts for the cases of the pure authority of the judge. Let us then see what the Platonic theory of authority is. According to Plato, every authority is, or at least should have, been founded on justice and equality, or equity. It's not equality, equity, justice or equity. All other forms of authority are illegitimate, which means practically that they're unstable, undurable, momentary, ephemeral, accidental. They are nothing but pseudo authorities. In reality, all power that does not rest on justice does not rest on any authority in the proper sense of the term either. The hold on power is maintained through force, through terror, but such a hold is necessary precarious. There is no doubt that this theory is false in its exclusion of other forms of authority. The authority of the master or the leader, and again, that's unforced. They are forced. Therefore, he would be criticizing master. The leader is again through consent, right, not force, and knowledge, and therefore isn't that justice, right? So therefore, the authority of the master or the authority of the leader, as such, obviously have nothing to do with justice, right? The authority of the father is also independent of whether he embodies justice, or whether or not he embodies justice. In order to see this, all we have to do is mention that there are conflicts between filial obedience and the sense of justice. A father's order can be executed without discussion, without reaction, even if it contradicts what the son believes is fair. And and the same goes to the master and to the leader. So therefore, this idea is that, okay, the judge only operates what is just. The order can only do what is justice and the order combined. But then the father can give an order that because of the filial obedience, the obligation of the father, you obey, even if you don't think it's fair. The same thing may be with the master, and same thing with the slave, right? He says. But on the other hand, the mere fact that such conflicts exist proves that justice can found found a sui generis, a truly generous authority, capable of counterbalancing or even destroying the authority of the master, the leader, or the slave. Examples are found too numerous and well known to be bothers with citing one. Justice can therefore serve as a foundation, as a sui generis authority, and Plato was only wrong in denying the independent existence of the three other types of authority. So, in other words, it is truly originating sui generis, truly originating authority in a sense, and it can nullify the other authorities. But it doesn't mean those authorities don't exist in a sense, right? Let us mention the fable narrated by Herodotus 96:10 of the birth of the monarchy among the Medes. This is the Ring of Gyges, I suspect, right? The Medes used to live in a state of anarchy, the state of nature, as it came to be later known, in which absolute injustice prevailed. Hobbes's bellum obrum contra war of all against all, right? Bellum obrum contra omnes. The war of all against all, right? One of them who has the ambition who out of his ambition for aspired power started practicing justice. The others came to him to submit the disputes, and he settled as a respected arbiter. When his clients became too numerous, he refused to receive them all, saying that he had also to take care of his own business. So the Medes made him king in order to discharge him of his private concerns. After he became king, he asked for gods to strengthen his power. After he got what he asked for, he carried on observing justice. But he also combined it with severity, prosecuting the guilty even when no one asked him to do so. In other words, he went from being an arbiter to becoming a judge and prosecutor. There is a certain nothing. This is certainly nothing but a fable, but it shows how the power among the Medes emerged, right? But it shows that it is not contrary to the psychology to establish a power and then subsequently an absolute authority on justice alone. And since, in order for authority to exist, it only has to be recognized in practice, and in principle, possible that the authority of justice becomes a total authority, and subsequently an absolute power, as Plato wished. In other words, he then shows how Hobbes fulfills Aristotle's criteria. Using Herodotus, the Hobbesian social contract, the consent of this arbiter, this authority, this judge. Hobbes and Locke, both would say this. This was an active social contract that this occurs, that they agree to him being a king and ruler. To be sure, and this is ultimately Platonic, right? This is how authority of justice becomes total authority, as Plato wished. To be sure, political power has, in fact, seldom had justice as its base. If this element was involved at all, it was always been accompanied by others: the authority of the leader, the authority of the master, the authority of the father, and dominated by them. So his point is that political power has seldom been merely justice, but rather other things that emerge here. But the fact remains that justice can be one of these elements of total authority. There is therefore one pure and irreducible type of authority that can be called irreducible type of authority that can be called the authority of the judge. So the authority of the judge. Indeed, the authority of the judge cannot be explained other than by Plato's theory. And it's obvious that the principle of justice or equity belongs to with these types of authority we have listed as variants of pure types of authority of the judge. The judge, in the strict sense of the word, is a civil servant who depends on a political power, that is to say, a state, and presupposes this. See the above cited fable of Herodotus, right? In order to be truly a judge, he had to be assisted by force and base himself on laws recognized by the state. In other words, his power is complex, and his authority seems necessary to imply other elements besides that of justice, that of the leader, for instance. But the fact remains that 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 the somewhat personal authority of the judge pertains solely to his equity. In other words, the question of justice brings therefore a brings therefore a case of the pure authority of justice. So therefore, okay, this can be clearly seen in the variant of the arbiter of the variant of the authority of the arbiter, which is, to tell the truth, not a variant, but the pure type. It is the authority of the judge that is a variant of the authority of the arbiter. In other words, it is the judge that is the authority of the arbiter. If we do not react against the acts of judgments of the arbiter for the chosen, it is because we assume his impartiality. That is to say, precisely the fact that he embodies, so to speak, justice. Thus, the just or honest man possesses an unquestionable authority, even if he does not hold the position of the arbiter. Generally speaking, the potential of impartiality or objectivity, disinterestedness, and so on, always gives rise to authority, and the authority of the supervisor, a censor, and so on, cannot be explained without bringing in the element of what we call the authority of the judge. This element is also involved without any doubt in the authority of the confessor. Right? He's an arbiter, he's a judge. So therefore, even the authority of the supervisor, the censor, this, and then what we call even the judge, and even the confessor implies an aspect of that you are an honest man, an arbiter, neutrality in a sense, justice, right? The three investigative theories, therefore, correspond to three distinct, irreducible types of authority. There remains a fourth pure type, that of the father over his children, and a fourth theory, namely the scholastics or theological theory of authority, theological theocratic authority. It is therefore natural to assume that this theory, in principle, too universal, corresponds in reality only to the fourth type authority, in the same way that each of the other theories correspond to one pure type. The correlation between the theological theory of the authority and the authority of the Father seem at first sight rather artificial. However, let us note that the theological theory according to which every true and legitimate authority, which is something other than simple force, derives from God, and is nothing other than a transfer. Okay, this is my arm biting. Which is which is nothing other than a transfer of divine authority, always implies the principle of the transmission of the human and, in fact, political authority of the head of state through inheritance, right? So therefore, even the king, that's the inheritance, this transmission of this, the authority of the father brings to his son, the king to his son, right? In other words, the always implied in principle transmission of the human and political authority of the head of state through inheritance. And yet, it is only in the authority of the father that the notion of hereditary is naturally involved. This authority is founded in a relation between parent and children. It is natural to accept the authority of the father, the authority of the father, except the authority of the father passes like an inheritance to the son, in so much he himself becomes father, and his own father passes away. Given that, according to the scholastics theory, that's the scholastic, St. Thomas and these guys. And again, but the problem is that isn't the scholastics children of Aristotle, and wouldn't they connect Aristotle's theory? Wouldn't Augustine then have been a choice here? I don't know. I don't. Again, I I don't. We have to remember that Russian Jew or Orthodox. To what extent does he understand Augustine? Does he understand what scholastics really mean? Versus his understanding of scholastics is stirring with the church, right? So let's be his Kojeve's using this term very loosely in this sense, right? Uh, Given that, according to scholastic theory, every human authority has a divine essence. In order to study this theory, we need to investigate the relation of this absolute authority to God. Given that God incarnates the summa of authority, so God is the summa, the highest, summa, the highest, right? It is no surprising that we find a theological all the four types we have enumerated. God is a man, master, and Lord. The authority of the master is therefore an integral element of global divine authority, but he's also leader, the Lord of hosts, Sabbatha, the political leader. I think this is also English, right? This is English in the text. Politicos, king, right? Politikos, right? Maybe Greek, who guides his people while having knowledge in advance of their destinies. The element king, I think the problem is the Old Testament is king, not politikos, king. That's why political leader, king. Um, um, he is a leader, Lord of hosts, political leader who guides his people while having knowledge of in advance of their destinies. The element of his authority of leader, therefore, is also involved in divine authority. At the same time, divine justice is a religious category of the primary importance, God being always conceived as supreme judge of man and sovereign embodiment of as the sovereign embodiment of justice and equity. Divine authority integrates, therefore, also the elements of the authority of the judge. We have seen we have already had three theories accounting for these three types of pure authority. The scholastic theory is interesting for us only insofar as it can account for the last type of pure authority, namely that of the Father. Indeed, the global divine authority implies in practice this last type of authority. God is also Father, our Father in heaven. Theological theory must therefore account for what we have called the authority of the Father, and for that which the three other theories cannot explain. Note, this is a note. This is one of his notes. We have seen the divine authority differ from human authority. In the fact that it implies no risk, since all reactions against the act of God are absolutely impossible. In the case of authority of the judge, this does not present any inconvenience, since divine judgments are infallible. Similarly, the authority of the leader, divine power remains an authority and not a simple force, insomuch as God is assumed to be omniscient. But it's no less the case with the authority of the master. Divine omnipotence can in no way establish its authority, being in the end nothing other than the submission of force. We have seen that the authority of the master, which is something different from power or potency derived from his strength, is exclusively founded on the risk he runs in his struggle to the death. But this is out of the question in the case of God. Theological theory cannot therefore account for the case of the pure authority or the Hegelian authority of the master, right? Because there's no risk involved by the God. Um, I'm not, and but unless maybe Hegel's wrong here, maybe it is fear. Well, that's the point. Maybe it is fear that what explains the authority of the master is submission to fear, not recognition. Recognition of the reality of death, and therefore submission to fear. And scholastics must have realized this more or less consciously, since we see a pronounced tendency in them towards eliminating the term master in favor of father. As for God, as love, this has nothing to do with authority, strictly speaking. Okay, this is so. Therefore, love has no authority, right? And this is where Augustine. This is why you can't use Augustine. I argue that no, Mister Kojeve, you're wrong. Here, you're wrong because if you're going to argue the master thing, you have a problem of fear. You argue, oh, but it's risk of the master, and this fear of submission by the slave is out of fear. It's not and actually authority is not about the. It's not about the one exercise. It's a reaction by the person receiving it. Right. That's the whole point. So there is a contradiction, or there's a problem in your model here. This is why love is probably something important to understand. As for God, something has nothing to do with authority, strictly speaking. In this aspect, God wants to make men act spontaneously. That is to say, as as both lover and beloved. He eschews his authority. He eschews authority. No. Okay, this is where I'm going to think you're wrong, Kojeve. This is maybe true authority in that sense. Actually, the question of love in friendship may be the basis of where true authority rests. And authority is done of care, and love and care is the kind of rule that points to a beneficence, right? Done for the good, the benefit of something, and therefore friendship is a reciprocal love. Father is not reciprocal in that sense. Directly, it's not perfectly reciprocal. Agape, sorge, these may be not perfectly reciprocal. So um, he eschews his authority. Compare, however, that what has been said above on the affinities between love and authority. Right. This is we said a bit earlier. The previous section, he talked about love and authority, and I disagreed with him on that. I think he's wrong here. The notion of God the Father is evident in the moment God is considered the creator of the world and of man. That is to say, in Judeo-Christian and Islamic theologies. Insofar as scholastic theory explained or justified divine authority by the notion of God the Father, it adopted, therefore, the idea of creation. God is the father of men because he has effectually engendered them by creating them ex nihilo. He is their formal cause. But at the same time, the effect cannot disown its cause. If the cause is an act, if the cause acts on the effect by producing it, the effect cannot react on the cause. And in so much as men, having understood that they are God's work, they abandon the vain illusion of the possibility of reaction against divine acts. They recognize divine authority that has authority, and not only potential, and not only as potency, force. In other words, as authority, is nothing other than this recognition. That is to say, conscious and voluntary renunciation of reaction. So, what is recognition? Is this recognition? This becomes recognition is this conscious and voluntary renunciation of reactions. So, wait a minute, isn't that kind of Hegelian point? This is idea of recognition. This is why recognition is so important in Kojeve, right? And this is why he likes Hegel so much. This justification of authority by the relation of cause to effect has nothing to do with its justification by prediction, risk, or equity. So again, this justification of authority by relation of cause to effect has nothing to do with its justification by prediction, risk, or equity. It is therefore a theory distinct from those previously discussed. At the same time, it is obvious that it applies only to the authority of the Father and not to that of the leader, the master, and the judge. Right, this idea of God in that sense. The other ones was this idea of this problem does not apply to these things. It only applies to the authority of the Father. In general, however, scholastic theory tries to interpret the ensemble of divine authority as the authority of the Father, of the Creator, the cause. No, the so-called cosmological proof of God's existence is one justification of, or metaphysical explanation of divine authority, conceived as the guise of the authority of the Father. The Father equals cause. So the so-called ontological proof is also an attempt at ontological analysis of the same authority of the Father cause, Father being God. And as for the so-called physiotheological proof, it justifies divine authority. Considered in its aspects as authority of the leader. So therefore, these examples of this, right? At the same time, this authority reduces all human authority to divine action. All human authority to divine authority. It thus tends to interpret every human authority as a variant of the authority of the Father. Hence, the tendency to underline the paternal elements in the authority of political powers. The authority of the Father is the authority of the cause over the effect. But the cause transmits, by definition, its essence or its power to the effects. It is therefore natural to accept the principle of heredity in the transmission of the authority of the Father as a cause. In other words, hereditary. This is how the theological theory of authority has become the theory of hereditary monarchy, right? This idea of heredity of this, and then therefore the authority of the Father transferred the same way. To be sure, the notion of God the Creator is specifically Judeo-Christian, or even scholastic. But every theology and every theological theory of authority entails notions that are analogous, similar to the idea of creation. God is always more or less a custodian God. He is some sort of cause to the social and political group that recognizes his authority. He is also the one who guarantees continuity, filtration, filiation. In other words, a continuation of filiation. Right? That is to say, the unity of the group, and fixes its personality, its individuality that is distinct from others by determining its origins. Hence, the traditional character of the divinity of the sacred divine. God is always the God of ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Hence, also the sacred or divine character of every tradition. The past that determines the present is generally reduced eventually to a divine origin. Right? So even tradition is to this divine origin. We can therefore say that scholastic theory accounts not only for the authority of the Father, strictly speaking, but also of the pure type of authority of the Father in general, as well as the types or derived or complex authorities we have listed as variants. We can therefore characterize this theory along with the other three while stripping it of its theological character. In other words, without ascribing its causes to the ultimate divine cause, we can say that the authority of the Father, as well as the variants, can be explained in the final analysis by the real or supposed fact of the impossibility of or more precisely, the conscious and voluntary renunciation of any reaction on the on the parts of the effect against the act of the cause upon it. In other words, whatever thing has the command, any reaction, renunciation of any reaction on the part of the effect against the action of the cause that's acting on it. Right. It is clear in the case of pure authority of the father. As for the variance of the authority of the elderly over the young, we also find, beside the other elements, the notion of paternity or cause, in its general notion of generation or collective paternity. The generation of the elderly, the older generation, representing the generation of the fathers of the young, the new generation. The same goes the authority of tradition and those who possess it. The latter are not only the elderly, the maternal physical fathers of men of the moment, thus representing tradition. They are their spiritual fathers, embodying the cause that has made of the contemporaries what they are, and it is in their capacity as this cause which determines the given social, political, and cultural reality. That tradition, as such, exerts an authority. Reaction against it is voluntary and consciously renounced, because such a reaction would be a reaction against oneself, a kind of suicide. So therefore, there's a tradition, and that stuff is a denial of who you are and what you are, right? And therefore, you can do it, but you will most likely won't, because to do it would be a kind of suicide. Isn't that when we reject our traditions and our identity, this is a kind of suicide. You can see this in the transgender identity. What is transgenderism but a kind of suicide? Trust me, if you look at the records of what happens to transgender people after transitioning, they say they're doing it because they're trying to avoid the fear. If they don't deal with it, they commit suicide. Well, they still commit suicide after they transition to a high degree. So it is a problem of this, a kind of suicide in that sense. From this viewpoint, the authority of the dead, which can be explained by the fact that the dead are even more cause than the living. The cause generally disappeared after it has produced its effects, and does not exist in or as the latter. But the purest, in other words, so therefore, from this viewpoint, the authority of the dead can be explained by the fact that the dead are even more cause than the living. The cause generally disappears after it has produced its effect, and does not exist in or as in the latter, right? So therefore, the dead is still dead, but it still has effect, right? But the purest case, of the authority of the Father considers as the authority um, of the cause over the effect is perhaps the authority of the author, right? The author, right? A book, right? In the broader sense of the term, over his work. For example, the authority of a leader of a literary, artistic, or other school of thought, the authority of the founder of a colony, the authority of a Baden power among the scouts, and so on. So this is interesting. This is a creator of a sect, a literary intellectual sect. Now, the scouts, the idea of the founder of a school of thought, an intellectual sect. Straussians, Kojeve. This is that little line, Kojeve. That this idea of the creation of this ultimate authority is the authority of an author, something, but an author of a sect, an author of a group. This is the ultimate authority in that sense. This has God. This is the authority of the cause that stays there even after his death. The authority of the author, the authority of the thing who creates, the founder in that sense, right? The founder keeps on, his authority lasts in the sense that his intent, the thing he made, keeps on going, right? His work or his school, right? Okay, that's it. We stop here. This has been longer than I want it to be. This is a long section. I want to keep it checked. So if you have any comments or questions, please put them below. See if you like any comments. I'll see them. I'll respond to them. If you liked it, like it, and say like, and share it on social media. Share it with your friends. Tell people about it. If you have, if you've subscribed, great, thank you. But if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. I noticed we've been losing people. I think the system's been deleting some old unstable. Some accounts may have been shut down, and therefore some. So I know I know 2 or 3 people I used to know died. They're old and they were following me. But you can subscribe and get encourage other people to subscribe. Let's grow this thing. We're 300. We're a little over 300. Let's keep on growing. It's not regress. Now, if you didn't like it, you can thumb down it, but say why in the notes. Say why. What's wrong? Maybe something I missed, something I didn't deal with. Maybe you wanted me to deal with it. And like, okay, just tell me. We can maybe address it. We can learn from this, right? Otherwise, you can follow me on follow me on social media. Links are below. Another thing you can do is, if you want to help me to do what I'm doing, contribute something to this. You can always do so by subscribing through Patreon or Subscribestar. I know people aren't there, and I'm not the greatest on these things. There's only so many people follow me, and I don't think they're, maybe they're poor students can't afford it. Well, I wish someone would give me some, I need a patron. I would like a patron. Someone does support me. It's tough. But you're saying you're doing it for free. Why don't you charge people? Whatever. Second, so subscribe to our Patreon, or you can go buy one of my books if you're not done so already, or you don't want to. If you want to, you can see it below there. Well, that's it. We will continue this. These are Tuesdays and Thursdays postings usually. We will continue on Montesquieu's Mondays and Wednesdays, and until usually on Fridays it will be either a live stream or some messing around thing. Okay. Well, take care. Bye bye. Have a good day.